A weird remake. Hey guys, how is everybody doing? And today we are capping off Sean Connery's James Bond movies with Never Say Never Again. Now, to kind of clear the air, there might be some confusion with some of you that are huge James Bond movies, or maybe there's some of you that don't know. I honestly found out about this as I was watching the movie. So, for a couple of days, I was kind of wondering why this wasn't in my collection with the Sean Connery movies that I owned. Excuse me, I have the collection of Sean Connery's movies only. And for some weird reason, this movie wasn't in the collection, and I was kind of wondering what was going on there. And so kind of created a little bit of confusion. So I had to rent this movie. This is the first James Bond movie that I actually had to rent so I can watch it. And, I was kind of sitting around and I was thinking about it, so I decided to look it up. But apparently, this movie is considered a unofficial James Bond movie. For the reason being is that the production company and the people that own this franchise had no part in making this movie, and they had no part in making this movie. They were away from this project. They did not change a thing. They were not part of the filmmaking process. They did absolutely nothing for this movie, basically. And for the reason being is that the screenwriter, and I believe he also directed this movie, if I'm not wrong there. The screenwriter for this movie is actually the person that wrote the script for Thunderball. But apparently, at the time when that movie was coming out, there was a disagreement between one of the other screenwriters and the screenwriter of this movie and the original version of Thunderball. There was constant disagreements of where the movie should have gone and how the movie should have been made. And so they ended up making the movie that we saw in Thunderball. That was the original version of the movie. That was what the movie ended up being made as, which it wasn't very good. And so, pretty much, the screenwriter of that movie and this movie, he basically took it to court. He took it into legal action into what he wanted his movie to be because technically it was his script, and he was pissed and he wanted to make the movie that he wanted to make. He eventually won the rights to his script and won the rights to this title, but however, he only owned the rights to the script, not James Bond. So, years later, after Sean Connery got away from James Bond after Diamonds Are Forever, and Roger Moore was James Bond for that couple of years. I believe he was him for like a decade, over a decade, if I'm not wrong. And while Roger Moore's while Roger Moore's James Bond movies were going on, the screenwriter for Thunderball, since he had just won the rights, he decided to remake Thunderball and remake the movie that he originally wanted Thunderball to be. And so, here in fruition, in 1983, came out with the release of Never Say Never Again. And the production company that usually works on these movies had no part in it. It was simply just a remake of his script that he originally wanted Thunderball to be. Now, obviously, there might be some stuff that I'm missing, and there might be some stuff that I might have not lied about, that I might have not, stated correctly. Maybe there's something I said that isn't overly correct, but that is what I know from what I looked up and what I got from the story. Yeah, so editing me here, I'm in my pajamas and this is my editing corner. So when I was looking it up while editing, I kind of found out that I got half of the story wrong. So basically, I put the picture at the some point in the video. Hopefully you read it. If you didn't, basically, the script wasn't right, basically, and the guy didn't like how he didn't get credited, and he sued them, and then he got the rights to it. That's basically the summary. So back to the video. And I'm actually kind of happy for the screenwriter that he got to make the movie that he wanted to make. Now, I'm going to get into my thoughts about the movie in general, and so even before I give you my opinion on the movie, either if I liked it, loved it, hated it, or disliked it, I'm actually really happy for this guy that got to make the movie that he wanted to make. It's kind of like Zack Snyder's situation with the Justice League. He was basically fired. His Justice League was basically taken away from him after his daughter unfortunately passed away because Warner Brothers wanted to rush the movie out and they didn't care about his personal life, and they pushed the movie out and it did poorly, and he was given enough money to finish his version version of Justice League, and it ended up being really good, and people loved it. That was kind of what this movie kind of was. He won the rights to his script, and he got to make the movie that he wanted to make. And I absolutely champion that. I think that is amazing, and that hell, that could even be a positive for this movie in general. I am very happy to hear that. Now, either if I loved it or hated it, I'm still happy for the guy. But with that all out of the way and enough stalling, here are my thoughts on Never Say Never Again, or else known as Thunderball the remake. Still weird saying that. But starting off with my positives on Never Say Never Again, like I was talking about earlier, this was kind of the point in time where Roger Moore was James Bond. Sean Connery left, Roger Moore came in and filled the shoes, and he became the next James Bond for the last couple of years. He's iconic in the role. He has a few good movies, but he also has his bad movies from what I hear, but which James Bond doesn't. And this was at the point in time where Sean Connery came back to the role after a decade of being away from him and after someone else had taken over and hell, some people argue did better than him. And what I liked about this movie is that Sean Connery seemed determined for this movie. He seemed like he wanted to give his all in this movie and wanted to show the world that he can still be James Bond no matter who else plays him, that I can still play this character. And this is my character, and I'm the reason that he's so popular. And you can definitely tell throughout this movie, he seemed more physical. He had like more moments where he seemed physical. He was like more serious, and he wasn't like goofing around, having that kind of Looney Tunes kind of like attitude where he just jokes around all the time, kind of like Peter Parker, who I think of as like he's kind of similar to Spider-Man, where he's joking around the whole time. But in this movie, he seemed more serious. He seemed more determined and everything. And even in the action sequences, it felt like Sean Connery gave his all, even though it's not, even if it's obvious it's a stunt double. But he still did a pretty good job, and I just felt like while watching this movie, he just seemed determined to show that he can still be James Bond, and I couldn't help but get that feeling throughout the whole movie, and that's what I loved about him in this movie. It felt good to see him back in this character. Now, yes, he does look older, obviously, so maybe he won't have that charm, but it still felt good to see him back in the role. And going along with that, now, yes, this movie does have its moments where it's jokey or doesn't take itself seriously, which I'll get into later. But this movie felt like it was more serious and it wasn't goofy, it wasn't campy, it wasn't joking around, making dumb jokes or whatever like the other ones did, because they did have their moments where they made pretty mediocre jokes. However, this movie seemed to take itself more serious, and I really liked that. Now, I don't know if that was just the approach of the director, or maybe it was the screenwriter himself, maybe he just wrote James Bond to be a more serious role in this movie. But either ways, this movie just felt more serious, and I really enjoyed that. It was kind of nice to watch a James Bond movie that wasn't constantly kind of like 60s cheese, I guess you can say, and just goofing around, making jokes that don't age well, or making things just look ridiculous when they're not meant to, but they're just funny. But this movie, when I was watching it, it felt more serious, and it felt like it was a real James Bond movie and not him just goofing around the whole time. And since this is technically a remake of Thunderball, excuse me, all of you probably already know my thoughts on that movie. I did not really enjoy it at all. It was very boring. I just could not get into it. I just did not enjoy it whatsoever. But I will say that this version is definitely better. This is the version that I do think is the better version of Thunderball of what we should have got. Now, yes, there are moments to where it doesn't feel like it was a Thunderball remake, and it seemed like they had to change a lot so that it didn't seem like a direct copy of the movie. And since Thunderball was setting up other movies and paying off setups from the other movies, it doesn't really do that, and kind of introduces other villains at moments, which I'll get into that later as well. But I do really enjoy this version a lot better, and I understand why the screenwriter wanted to make his version, and I'm very happy that he did because this version is better. Moving on to my mixed aspects, and now this is kind of just a small little thing because I just thought this was funny. The guy that plays Mr. Bean is in this movie, and he is kind of like a comedic relief, kind of the goofball type character. Now, one, it's kind of cool to see him because I love Mr. Bean, but however, I don't feel like he should have been in this movie. I was talking about how this movie took itself more serious, but like I said, there are also moments where it doesn't take itself seriously and does kind of have those goofy moments throughout the movie. And this character was one of them. He was kind of there as the comedic relief, kind of just like the goofball type character. And I didn't really like it because of that. But since it was played by Mr. Bean's actor, it was kind of hard not to enjoy him. And I will say this movie does feel different from the other James Bond movies. And I'm not talking just about Thunderball and how it's, a different movie from that, which obviously it is. But, kind of watching all of these movies back to back to back and kind of getting that feeling or whatever, what these movies go for and how Sean Connery's movies always went, the difference and feel of these movies is both kind of a good thing and a bad thing. Now, one is because I'm kind of used to it, and two is just like it kind of feels weird to see this movie as it is in a way. Like it's kind of hard to describe it other than saying that this movie just feels different from the other ones, which I like it, but once you kind of get that taste, it doesn't really go away. But like I said, it's kind of hard to talk about what I mean by that. It's more of like one of those things like you watch it and I say it and you're like, oh yeah, I get what you mean. It's kind of like that, so it's kind of hard for me to talk about that and kind of give examples, really. Like, I could just say, oh, it's the look of the movie or whatever. But, it's kind of, like I said, it's just kind of hard to describe it other than just saying, oh, I just felt like it felt different without you, like, fully understanding. Just watch the movie, you'll understand. It's only like $4 on Amazon. But now moving on to my negatives. This is more of a nitpick. And at the same time, I'm not complaining. This movie seems to focus on sex. Like, a lot. Now, we've known that James Bond has been that horny bastard, and no matter what, he seems to get laid in every movie he's in. There's always the love interest. There's always that one character, just that one, that, becomes the love interest and, James Bond falls for and hooks up with in the movie. But my god, man, this movie is horny. And it seems to focus on sex to where I honestly thought I accidentally put in a porn parody of James Bond. It got to that point. I don't know, I'm not complaining, but there's literally a moment where basically full boobs are shown. Like twice, actually.
Hello, nurse.
To where I was shocked to see that this movie was rated PG. You showed off full boobs, and this movie got a PG rating. And this movie came out in 1980. The PG-13 rating was a thing at the time. But nope, they're just like, oh, yep, we're gonna show full boobs. You get a PG rating, which whatever. And then there's literally a moment where basically James Bond almost commits assault because there's a moment where he's just rubbing down this girl that he doesn't even fucking know, and he doesn't work at this place, and he's just rubbing her down, kind of massaging her. And then when the real person comes, he just leaves like fucking quickly, and the girl's just like, oh, sorry about the way. And she goes, well, what about the one guy? He goes, what guy? That's full on fucking assault. Like,
may I start you off with a cocktail?
You don't work here, do you?
I do not.
yeah, it's consensual, yes, so maybe it's not full on assault. But if you don't work there and you're doing this shit to a random lady you don't know, you can get in big trouble, but whatever, what do I know? And again, this is kind of like a small little thing, but the villains in this movie are villains that we've seen before, which basically just means that they're generic. Now, yeah, it's technically a remake of Thunderball, so maybe they will seem familiar, but the villain in this movie is basically just the same guy from Thunderball. And I was kind of hoping they would change it a little bit, and then they introduced other like side villains in it with like this one girl or whatever, but she's not even that interesting, and she's also just generic and kind of like a character we've seen before in these movies. So yeah, it was kind of just like, oh, whatever type thing. Which none of the like, it's always been a problem of mine with these movies that these villains have never really been very good nor entertaining. So what I'm saying now is nothing new from what I've been saying before, I guess. But I've always had an issue with these movies when it comes to its villains. But however, yeah, they're just villains that we've seen before, and they're just pretty generic. All in all, guys, I actually really enjoy Never Say Never Again. Now, technically an unofficial James Bond movie, and technically it doesn't really count when it comes to, the James Bond universe or whatever. Whatever. Basically, in the end, it just doesn't matter as a film. However, since I watched it, and I'm glad I watched it, so I can say like, oh, I actually watched that movie, and maybe other people should watch it. So I actually really enjoyed it. It is a better version of Thunderball, and I understand why this should have been the version that it should have been. I enjoyed it for what it was, and honestly, if you haven't seen it and you're a big James Bond fan, I honestly would recommend that you at least give it a try. I really enjoyed it. But what do you guys think about Never Say Never Again? Have you actually seen this movie? And if so, what do you think about it? Do you like this movie? Do you not like this movie? Do you prefer it over Thunderball? Or do you actually prefer Thunderball over this movie? Let me know in the comments below and we shall talk about it. And if you like this video, like it. If you love to subscribe to the bell notification so you will get notified for all my latest videos and for my Sean Connery James Bond ranking. And of course, until my next video, I'll see you all next time.